Hello, I'm Shellie Graziano. Some of you already know me, and I'm going to be doing this month's monthly craft with you since we aren't open to do it at the center. And it's called Bird on a Wire, Birds on a Wire. We're going to start with the supply list. So you are going to need 16 by 20 canvas. And if a canvas is not available to you, cut up a cardboard box. I know you've been ordering stuff, or you can use foam board or anything that you can cover with fabric. You need different patterns of scrapbooking paper or gift wrap or any other attractive paper. Black Sharpie, a sharpening pen, craft paint, and part of a sponge. This is optional. Or if you're using a cardboard piece, attractive fabric. Mod Podge, and if it's not available to you right now, just use glue and attach the birds. Later on, when the stores are open, we will paint the entire piece later with Mod Podge or other decoupage medium. A cheap 2-inch brush and a template of birds. You can email request to me at sheila.graziano@stmarysmd.com. And you'll need to print this out. If you don't have access to email, you can just go to the internet and type in bird silhouettes and different patterns will crop up. Just click on images. If you email to me, I will send you copies of these. These are nice varieties, and you'll have a selection. You'll still need to print them out. So we'll start with a blank canvas. This is 16 by 20. And I'll use some paint. So let me just flick this down so I can show you. Obviously, I have grandchildren that like to paint. I'm going to choose kind of a deeper color. I don't need a lot. I'm just going to put it right here in the center. And this is an old sponge piece. And I'm just going to kind of dab it a little bit. It's a good idea to have a piece of scrap paper so you can dab off the excess paint until we get a nice spongy look. And I'm liking the look of that. So I'm going to start in the center, kind of work around. Just keep dabbing. I'll get some more paint. Actually, I'm going to use some of the excess paint that's on my scrap piece of fabric, paper, because I really hate to waste. I feel like the sponge look gives it just a little bit of texture and makes it interesting. But you can use paint. Just use your paintbrush and make it solid if you wish. I'm just going to keep dabbing this on here. So I've dabbed paint all over the canvas, and then because I like to play with things, I decided to try a few. I'm just going to swirl the edges just to see if I like that look. And I think I do. It seems like it just kind of frames it a little bit. You don't have to do that, but you can if you want to. It's just I kind of like the swirly look. Maybe I'll just kind of blend in different places. I know, it feels like I've just started a whole new project. The nice thing about working oh, I really like that look. I find the nice thing about working with acrylics is that they do dry fast, but also if I didn't like a certain section and I feel like I got it too dark, I could just take some white and put the white in, and then I could just redab and lighten up the section. So it's just another nice little thing to know. And I think that's a nice, interesting background. So while this is drying, we can now move on to the cutting out the birds. So now we're going to talk about patterns of scrapbook paper. I got these out of this book, and it has all kinds of varieties of colors and patterns. These are the 4 patterns that I've chosen. So here are my templates, and I'm going to trace them onto the pattern. So let's take this yellow first. I'll fold it over and end up making 2 birds at once. I'm going to take one of the patterns and simply trace around it. Press kind of hard because we're going to be following the impression pattern that we make. Just keep on going. Never mind about the feet. We're not going to be cutting out little feet. Feet don't show up anyway when birds are sitting on a wire. We take that off and we can see that we've made an impression. It hasn't pressed all the way to the other side, but when we cut this out, we'll be cutting out 2 birds at once. A little trick that I like to do is staple close to the draw lines. That way the paper stays in place. You probably can't see the impression, but I'm close up so I can see it. Now, if you really do need to see it better as you cut, you can go ahead and trace around with the pen where you see the impressions that you've made, if you need to do that. And because it's on the wrong side of the paper, it won't show up. So this is what we'll be cutting out. Another little trick is, just so it's easier to handle, I'm going to cut around the bird in a roundabout way so that I don't have to keep turning a large piece of paper around. And you just follow along these lines. It doesn't have to be perfect, just so that you get the general impression that you've got a bird outline. Cut off this little snip of a tail. And now I have 2 yellow birds. I'll be placing them somewhere on here. But you see the You'll see how it'll show up against this blue. It'll look really nice. So, moving on to another pattern. I've got these. I'll set them aside. And now maybe this would be a good one. Let's see. I like this fella right here. I folded this over. And I'll place it down. Go over it. I'm pressing pretty hard. And even at that, I can still use the same pattern again and again if I want to. Skipping the feet, coming up. Get that beak last thing. A couple of staples outside the lines. Holds the paper in place. Cut out this section so it's easier to cut in its entirety. It gets exciting when you use a different pattern each time and kind of can't wait to see how it's going to turn out. I used very simple silhouettes without a lot of detail to make things easier. Let's see how these look. Well, it's hard to believe that they look very, very different. So that's part of the excitement of it. I will cut out, I guess, 3 more pair. And I do have 2 sets of templates. So I think I'll choose this one next. And then we'll come back to the video when I have all of them cut out. Well, I made a very interesting discovery while I was cutting those birds out. They came out looking very pretty. However, I find that they don't really show up very well when you put them on the canvas. This one just about blends in. So I'll save those for sometime when I do a really deep background. Again, these, pretty, but they don't show up. These 2 show up pretty well, so I'll definitely use them. And these guys show up nicely, so I'll use them. So what I did is I went back to my scrapbook paper and found some deeper colored patterns and made different ones. These will surely show up. And I made extras so that I could, if I didn't like the way one turned out, I could count on another one. So let's just see how these look up against the canvas. That one's going to show up, and that one looks really pretty too. So now that we have our birds, it's time to do the wire. You remember in the yellow one, I just have a 1, 2, 3, a zigzag line. I'm going to do the same thing on this blue canvas. It's done with 2 magical things, a Sharpie and a yardstick. So let's have the first line Hold it down pretty well. And that's the first line. That's a rather sharp line. This one won't be quite so sharp. 2 and 3. Maybe you'll want your lines to go the other way, or maybe you'll want 3 lines like that. Or maybe you'll just want to make a silhouette of a tree and have the birds. Then it'll be birds in a tree instead of birds on a wire. You can do it however you like. So then we will determine where we want to put our little birds. Do we want to make the pairs stay together? Do you want to mix them up? Remember, because you folded the papers over, you've got one of each type facing in different directions. But I find with this part, it's better to lay it down flat. So we're going to do that. This is the configuration that I came up with. I have 2 pair, just kind of looking at each other, and the rest of the guys I mixed up a bit. So we'll take some Mod Podge, open it up. I love using lids from jars for Mod Podge and a small amount of paint. It just really keeps it well. It's easy to reuse. If you don't have Mod Podge because you can't get to the store, you can do this part with Elmer's glue or school glue or whatever kind of glue you have. And I'll start here at the bottom. Just going to paint the glue or the Mod Podge on here. And then I'll put him right back where I got him, which is right there. And press him down, make sure he's on there pretty good. You'll notice that some of my birds are pointing up and some of them are pointing down. That's to give them different looks. So we'll take the next one, paint the Mod Podge, all the sides. This dries invisible, so it doesn't matter if some squeezes out. Which some is definitely doing that. Here's a little piece of tail that's sticking up. Let me just add a little bit of adhesive. Trying to make them as flat as we can. After we get them all glued down, then we're going to paint the whole thing with Mod Podge. That's decoupaging. Now that the birds have been glued to the canvas in the positions that I wanted, all that remains to be done now is to put the Mod Podge on the rest of the whole structure thing project. So I'm just going to take my jar lid, and I'm using a cheap 2-inch brush. I'm going to start by getting the edges of the birds. Let's start with this one up here. You want to get the edges first of each bird. And I'm going to move on to the next one. Doesn't have to be real precise. For the time being, just putting some over to the birds. We'll let this dry fully before we go over the entire canvas. It doesn't matter if it's a little thick and looks a little bit white. It does dry clear. He's got a couple of little wrinkles in him, kind of like me. That's all right. Wow, he's really looking up there. That's what happens when you try to do it upside down, but I still like him. It won't take long for these to dry. As I mentioned just a few seconds ago, some of these have wrinkles in them, like me. So what we're going to do is we'll get our hands messy. That's all right. We'll just press them down and make it as flat as possible. Paper's a little bit stretchy. We're just, it's not going to hurt anything to do this. But it does make for a better looking project if it's as flat as possible. Not that we don't appreciate wrinkles. Continue to let this dry. Now that our glued birds are dry, let's go over the whole canvas with Mod Podge. It doesn't have to be perfectly neat. The point is to seal it. And I like for the paintbrush strokes to go in different directions because it gives it an interesting added texture. So let it be hodgepodge with your Mod Podge. The important thing, though, is to make sure you get every aspect. If you miss a spot, you can go over it later, but it's best to make sure you get all the spots because there's a little bit of a, well, there's a pretty significant sheen with Mod Podge. If you miss a spot, you're going to have a little place on your canvas that doesn't shine. Which will make it easier to find to fix, but it would be nice if you didn't have that on your finished product. A good way to see if you missed any spots is to look at your project from the side and make sure everything is shiny, especially if you have light across from you, then that light will provide a sheen on the shiny spots. Now maybe you would like to have yours up and down nice and straight. That's all right too. I like things a little messy and textured and interesting, but I do like a certain amount of structure. Oh, I got a little paintbrush hair in here. I'm going to pick it out. I'm going to try to pick it out. Boy, that's giving me a fit. Maybe I'll put it on top of a bird's head and make it look like an antenna. Let's see if I can pull it off with this brush. Yeah. Oh, all gone. If I kept my mouth shut, you wouldn't have even noticed it. All right, let's see. Looks like I got everything. And there you go. Birds on a wire. Hope you enjoyed this, and we will do more crafts. Be on the lookout. Stay safe out there, people.